Thank you very much, Pat. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure and honor to be speaking to you today. I would like to give you some important updated information about how our replanning strategy is progressing. As I mentioned last week, we will have a plan to share on Friday of this week. Today, I would like to talk about what is required to safely open and operate businesses and organizations. I will stress again that this is the reality today, but we must be prepared for the possibility that this could change. We are evaluating each step, and we will make adjustments as needed. We are not ready to declare the territory risk-free, and we believe it is responsible to continue to take precautions to keep all Yukoners safe. We are seeing more and more businesses reopen safely. Places like P&M and Raven are once again taking recycling. Optometrists are getting ready to take clients. Massage therapists are booking appointments. And food trucks are gearing up to serve food in popular locations. As things open more and more, we must continue to follow the safety measures that we all know that are keeping us safe. We must continue to be vigilant about physical distancing. We need to practice regular and thorough hand washing. If you are sick, you must stay home, not gathering in groups of more than 10, and also self-isolating when required. If we keep the border tightly controlled and continue to practice these safety measures, I believe our track to recovery will continue to move forward. We are tracking milestones to help guide our reopening plans, and one of these is that people are following precautionary measures when they are out of their homes. Shopping is a really good example. Now, we all have witnessed moments of great physical distancing at stores around the territory, and I thank you all for that. But we also have seen some situations here and there where this is not being as observed. I must stress to people that it is on the individual to follow these orders. Now, business owners, they are putting safety precautions in place, and they're limiting the number of people in their stores and offices, but it is up to all of us to be mindful of how close we are to others. As businesses and nonprofits and organizations decide to reopen and to lift the restrictions, the Yukon government requires that all employers complete COVID-19 operational plans. While these plans do not need to be approved by Yukon Workers' Compensation Health and Safety Board, the team is available to review your plans and offer support throughout the process, and we thank them very much for that. Templates for operating plans will be available this week. The template is intended to guide businesses and service providers through the process of identifying and mitigating the health and safety hazards related to COVID-19. Businesses currently working on plans can email covid19info@gov.yk.ca or also call our inquiry desk, inquiry line for further guidance. If an occupational health and safety officer performs a site visit, employers may be asked to produce a copy of their COVID-19 operational plan. To support businesses that have reopened or who are planning to reopen, we are developing clear guidelines for operation. The Chief Medical Officer of Health's office and staff from key departments are working on guidelines to give clarity to businesses, to NGOs, and to event organizers. As these are developed, they are uploaded to yukon.ca and also shared with those to whom they apply. Some examples of guidelines that have been produced so far, for example, farmers markets, food trucks, grocery stores, allied health professionals, optometrists, physical distancing and cleaning for businesses. And the team is very close to finalizing guidelines for personal care services that will have, and we will have those available for business operators this week. Businesses, events, or NGOs can check yukon.ca to see if their specifics have guidelines already developed. These guidelines will help answer questions about how they can reopen or how they can run their events. Now, as our economy begins to reopen and more businesses are determining safe ways to operate, Yukoners are being asked to return to work. This is an important part of reopening plan and is coming as a relief to many who have lost income during, due to business closures. Now, returning to work also brings very real concerns to parents. What is the plan for childcare? We recognize that these two things, opening the economy and childcare, well, they go hand in hand. In order to ensure that our reopening plans do not negatively impact parents and caregivers, we must have a solution to childcare. That is why our team is working on a plan to lift restrictions at childcare centers and summer camps. They will be contacting childcare operators and camp providers in the coming days to discuss how this can be done safely and to understand what capacity operators have. We want to work with operators to determine how much time they will need to get their operations back up and running. Do they need to bring staff back who currently are not working, for example? These and other questions will be discussed with our community of expert child care providers before lifting restrictions on these facilities. Now, I appreciate that this work will need to happen quickly, and I have confidence that the teams working on this understand how important this step is in part of our plans and how important it is to many Yukoners as well. Our border control restrictions continue, and as I've mentioned, we expect that these will continue for some time still. I have spoken with Governor Dunleavy about Alaskans returning home and Americans moving to Alaska. I will also speak to him about the number of American military personnel who are moving to their new deployments. As with all transitioning people, they will be expected to move through in 24 hours. The corridor that transitioning people can use is clearly defined, and a map is given to people when they enter Yukon. It identifies the route that they must take traveling through the Yukon. This will help keep transitioning people out of the communities and identifies gas and food services on their route and on their route only. I would also like to mention the rent assistance program that Ministers Frost and Stryker released yesterday. We know that Yukoners are struggling financially during this time. Our government has created a number of ways to support businesses and individuals as we move through this pandemic. The rent assistance program will help tenants who are not able to make rent payments and landlords who depend on that income. Now, it is only one of many supports that our government has introduced, all of which are geared to get money into the hands of Yukoners quickly. We expect to have information about a wage top-up program for low-income workers and also supports for students coming in the next few days. Before I close today, I'd like to take a moment to honor nurses during Nurse Week. Thank you. Thank you very much, Yukon nurses. I speak on behalf of all Yukoners when I say thank you. Thank you for everything you do to care for us when we need you the most. Thank you for always putting the needs of your patients ahead of your own and for giving yourself over to this incredibly important work that you do in these unprecedented times. Thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of all Yukoners. We appreciate you and we celebrate all that you do. Thank you very much, and off to you, Brennan Hanley.
Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Our last cases to date were announced on April 20th, and in spite of expanded testing criteria, we are still not finding more disease. With reduced risk of COVID-19 introductions, COVID-19 is now a rare disease in Yukon. We know that other conditions and illnesses, whether related to chronic conditions, mental health, harms from substances, or injuries, are not by any means rare. So how do we restrike the balance, keeping COVID-19 in the back seat while we continue to address our population's well-being? That's the challenge for all of us, and that is the rationale for proceeding with reopening in a measured and methodical way. In Yukon to date, we've been fortunate that all of our 11 cases are importations. That is, all cases were either directly related to travel outside Yukon or have been cases traced back to an immediate contact who has traveled. As we look to the future, our biggest ongoing pandemic threat is that COVID-19 will be introduced from outside the territory. That's why, as we move to easing restrictions, we must continue with stringent border controls. At present, we can only allow essential and critical workers, returning residents, family members coming to live with residents, and those transiting through to Alaska and NWT, with the strict requirements in place to expedite travel within safe parameters that the Premier described. Additional work is being done to ensure that those who are traveling through do so in the safest and quickest way possible. Part of the instructions that are given to people traveling through is guidance to assist people should they develop symptoms that require assessment. People should not be so afraid of COVID that they hide their symptoms. People who need medical assistance will and should always be able to get help so that they stay safe and so that appropriate public health measures can be implemented to protect Yukoners. I hear from many of you about your concerns that Americans traveling through our territory will leave COVID in their tracks. Well, so far, that has not happened despite hundreds, if not thousands, traveling through our territory. We're unable to limit travel to those who are returning home or military families relocating to one of the 9 U.S. military bases in Alaska. But we can and will ensure that they move through in a way that does not threaten our safety. Further, I do not anticipate us being ready to welcome international flights landing in Yukon this summer. Reducing importation risk remains the key pillar of our containment strategy. Keeping the borders controlled is accompanied by the 14-day self-isolation requirement for people coming into Yukon. We know that there are some 30,000 Canadians still outside Canada waiting to get home. Some of these Canadians may be Yukon citizens who got caught in lockdowns in other countries. When they arrive in Canada, they will be under federal quarantine. But whatever the federal requirements, they will still be required to self-isolate here if they have not already isolated at one of the 4 Canadian cities accepting international flights. Yukoners who leave the territory for any reason, and I recognize that there will be legitimate reasons to do so, will be required to self-isolate upon return. If you're planning time outside Yukon, make sure plans include considerations for 14 days of self-isolation on your return. Insisting on keeping border restrictions consistently in place while we maintain the Safe 6 measures allow us to lift restrictions within the territory, and we will hear more details about reopening plans by the end of this week. We've not seen new cases for 3 weeks. If the only numbers we see increasing continue to be our testing numbers and not our positive numbers, we will move to only posting updates on weekdays. That change will begin this weekend. We'll post an update on Friday and then again on Tuesday, since Monday is the Victoria Day holiday. As we begin to lift restrictions, we're also seeing more traffic on the roads. And this is a good reminder that this week is Canada Road Safety Week in Canada. Even what is happening on our roads is changing in COVID times. For example, Manitoba Public Insurance reported a 20% reduction in collisions since COVID-19 public health measures were put into place. And truckers on the 401 corridor are reporting a significant reduction in traffic, fewer collisions on that highway. Auto insurers are reducing or even rebating auto insurance for people who are driving less due to working at home. Now, part of my role as Chief Medical Officer of Health is to take issues and examine them from a public health perspective and to determine if there are patterns or issues that can be addressed and then make recommendations to address this issue. Tomorrow I'll be releasing the report called Motor Vehicles in Yukon, a Public Health Perspective. There are findings in this report which I think you'll find interesting. For example, that there's a seasonal pattern to motor vehicle injuries. Most collisions occurred in December and January, but there are more injuries and more severe injuries reported in July. Or that the biggest single factor associated with serious injuries is distracted driving. We need to remain vigilant and safe on the roads, even with the reduced traffic that we're experiencing now. Within the report are many recommendations on how to make our roads safer, whether these are individual, collective, or government initiatives. I feel that the report's recommendations will usefully inform upcoming revisions to Yukon's Motor Vehicles Act. back to COVID, you'll note that our 6 steps to staying safe may be tweaked slightly in the days to come, with the reopening of campgrounds anticipated for next month, and with my encouragement for Yukoners to get outside over the summer. In consultation with Yukon communities, chiefs and leaders, I'm working toward easing the language around travel to rural communities. I'm advising that Yukoners limit rather than avoid travel through rural communities. As we work to reopen campgrounds, we recognize that you will have to travel through some communities to reach your camping spot. But I want you to be mindful of how you move through those communities. I think the words safe, respectful, and limited travel might be the best way to prepare us for getting outside over the summer, while still respecting the wishes of our communities to be protected from unwanted visitors and unnecessary risks. Finally, I too would like to acknowledge this week as National Nursing Week, and I too want to thank all the nurses in Yukon. It's also the International Year of the Nurse, and this year, more than ever, we must be loud in our recognition of our nurses throughout the territory. This year's theme of Voice to Lead was almost prophetic, because here at home, just like across the country, nurses have been leading the charge. Nurses worked side by side with my staff at the beginning of the pandemic, and they continue to do so, playing a very important role in providing direction, support, and assistance. While we've been fortunate not to have any individuals hospitalized with COVID-19, we've had many people hospitalized for investigation of COVID amongst the usual array of other diagnoses. Whether in the emergency department or on our wards, our hospital nurses are there every day, prepared to provide care for whomever needs help. Meanwhile, Yukon community health nurses continue with their wide scope of regular duties while assisting with preparations in the event that COVID-19 enters a community. They're continuing to see clients and to test, when necessary, for COVID-19. Other nurses have been redeployed to the Respiratory Assessment Centre, while yet others work tracing contacts of people who were ill with COVID. If and when we get to a COVID vaccine for Yukon, or when we navigate influenza vaccine for next season, or aim to keep everyone up to date with immunizations, it's Yukon's public health nurses who will be organizing the campaign and asking you to roll up your sleeves. We talk about Yukon's ability to respond to a wave or an increase in our curve. As we ease up on restrictions, that ability and capacity to respond must be maintained. I'm confident that our nurses are ready, along with all our healthcare professionals, to meet that challenge. Meanwhile, for the rest of us, if we do what we need to do, maintain tight border control, self-isolate, follow the Safe 6, we may never need to know how ready they are. And that would be a good thing. Thank you. Merci, Masicho, Shonathan.
Thank you, Premier Silver. Thank you, Dr. Hanley. We'll now go to the phone lines, and we'll begin with Jane from CBC.
Hi. My question is for Dr. Hanley. You mentioned not welcoming international flights this summer, and apparently on the Condor website, they have their first flight from Frankfurt to Whitehorse, so listed on their website, arriving June 28th. Have you, I guess, is that flight not welcome to arrive here on June 28th?
Yeah, that flight will not be arriving, and I know that that website is still live, so I think there are still some communication connections to be made. But we will not be in a position to meet federal requirements for international arrivals, let alone comfortable with the risk. We're not going to apply a different category of risk assessment to international travel when we're still maintaining border controls domestically. It just would not make sense.
And so you have talked with Condor about, I guess, the logistics around the flight not arriving or around their travel plans for flights here at this time?
Let's say that communications will be occurring. I haven't had my own communication with Condor, but definitely we will be making that clear in the days to come.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
We'll move to Julien, Aurore Boreal.
Oui, ma question est pour le docteur Hanley. On parle de la réouverture des commerces locaux et de la distanciation sociale. Comment ça va se passer pour les marchés locaux comme le Fireweed Market cet été?
So the question is for Dr. Hanley. As the businesses are reopening, how is it going to happen, for example, with Fireweed Market and other businesses of the same kind?
Oui, merci. On a déjà eu plusieurs conversations avec des marchés, non seulement à Whitehorse, mais aussi à Dawson et dans les autres communautés. Donc, c'est pour les marchés de nous contacter avec leur plan, mais le conseil, c'est disponible déjà. Donc, il y a un guide pour l'ouverture des marchés avec tout qu'il faut pour les demandes, toutes les essentiels pour avoir une ouverture sécure pour les marchés. Donc c'est tout disponible et c'est pour les marchés, donc les organisations, pour décider s'ils peuvent faire tout qu'il faut pour les demandes. Donc, I just explained that market guidelines are available for food markets, and I know that the Fireweed Community Market has already been in contact with us and are aware of the requirements and the guidelines. The same with the Dawson Community Market, and others are free to open as long as they follow the published guidelines.
Prochaine question, Julienne. Okay, we'll move on then to Gord from Yukon News.
Yes, we've been hearing for 3 to 4 weeks that there is going to be a reopening plan. I'm just curious, why has there been what seems like a delay?
I wouldn't say a delay. If you know, every jurisdiction in Canada is in lockstep with our approach. We have conversations on a weekly basis with the premiers. We have on a weekly basis with the Prime Minister's office as well, and the Deputy Prime Minister. We had the guiding documents that were developed in that 3-week period that you speak of, which is progress. We've had the public health authorities from each region meeting also on a regular basis to determine the standards and principles for the nation, but then also regionally specific targets and requirements. All of this takes a lot of time. I see that our colleagues, I just spoke with Premier Cochrane this morning, and she introduced their plan today. Looking through that, it's going to be very similar to what you're going to see with ours. Same with British Columbia, their plans. You know, Yukon is in a similar situation to British Columbia, where we didn't do as many restrictions as other jurisdictions. So as you are seeing some of the other plans being announced in other jurisdictions, pay very close attention to what they're announcing. And what you'll see right across the nation from coast to coast to coast is very similar provisions being lifted in a very similar fashion for the most part. There are some outliers for sure, and in those outliers we are seeing some missteps, and we're seeing some other steps. So again, we're in a unique situation because we don't have community spread. We're in a unique situation because the actions of British Columbia and Alberta will really affect how we get into Phase 2 and Phase 3. But we are definitely in lockstep with the other territories and provinces in a measured marathon, not sprint, of reopening.
Follow-up, Gord?
No further questions.
Thank you. We'll move to Chris at CBC.
I guess this is a follow-up to Gord's question, though. Like, why
Yeah, I mean, if we have less of a situation than BC does, and we're largely in the same boat as the NWT, how come we're lagging behind those two jurisdictions as far as the reopening plan goes? And like, you guys have sort of teased a bunch of the details that are in it, so like, why a soft launch?
We made a conscientious decision that we would follow a scientific approach to getting information out and to follow those recommendations. We're not looking to act politically when it comes to these announcements. When we talk with the good folks in my department of VCO that are doing the due diligence of talking to all the stakeholders, all of the governments that are involved, all of the different agencies, the business organizations, I made the request early that we get information out as quickly as we are possible, as possible. Don't hesitate, and that's where we are today. Last week we made some major announcements about campsites. We're talking today about plans for childcare. We haven't been shy in as we get things ready to launch to putting those things out into the public domain before the plan comes out. Again, the reason for that is, we want to make sure that people don't just get hit with a date and then have to start preparing right away for a date that has come and gone. We want to make sure that folks know what our intentions are. One of the biggest things is reminding Yukoners how important the self-isolation is and how important the Safe 6 is. Just really reiterating that that's been our savior. Those two measures over and above everything else, it puts us in a unique situation, different than those other jurisdictions. We have made a commitment to the communities to make sure that we've worked with them when we talk about reopening, when we talk about campsites, when we talk about getting Yukoners to move around a little bit more. And I believe that we've been doing that in a very timely fashion. I don't think that any of our provisions that we're announcing are coming late, per se. They are coming at just the right time with balancing the needs to maintain the strict requirements, but at the same time allowing Yukoners to start moving around a little bit more freely.
Follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, thanks. My follow-up is that yesterday both opposition parties wrote to your government again asking for some manner of hearings on your government's response to COVID-19. I guess, you said you're not looking to act politically, but it seems to me that giving the stiff arm to the opposition parties kind of is acting politically.
Well, those are your words, not mine, Chris. I would say that the good parallel to draw would be the emergency situation that we do find ourselves on a yearly basis with wildland fire management. With that process, the scrutiny of the spending that we have to do in an emergency situation for wildland fire management, typically every year for the last decades, is in the supplementary budgets in the fall. So we believe that the best time to scrutinize COVID-19 spending would be in the fall when we present a supplementary budget. The purpose of these meetings is to further debate the 2020-2021 budget, the meetings that we've set up in May, which is what we agreed to do. So again, not acting politically at all. We said that we were going to allow for the scrutiny of the current budget, and remember the current budget was developed before COVID, and quickly went through. So now we're asking, or we're going to give the opportunity and to answer those questions on the current budget as well as possible with those 7 days that we've put aside. But again, we will not shy away from the scrutiny of the budgetary considerations for all of our actions on COVID.
Thank you. We'll now move to Gabrielle, Whitehorse Star.
Hi. In talking about limited travel to communities being now allowed, is that going to be a blanket rule or will it differ by community?
Yeah, so this is not going to be a rule, and remember that this wasn't a rule in the first place. It was a recommendation, and so I'm softening the recommendation at the same time of continuing an ongoing conversation with communities. So clearly there will be community input, including input from First Nations, and clearly there will be differences in how they perceive travel or visitation recommendation. So this is part of an ongoing process. We've had initial conversations to allow this as a general kind of framework. But as I've said in my views on opening the campgrounds before, that there will be differences in how, for instance, that plays out as to which campgrounds may be more accessible and which may be perhaps still off limits, or and that really depends on more detailed and ongoing conversations with communities. I just want to make sure that this is part of not just any kind of one-off blanket recommendation, but the beginning of a conversation that will take place over the months to come, as we are in different stages of the pandemic and as we are in different stages of assessment and confidence about the situation with our borders, our risk of importation, all of those factors that play into how comfortable we can be with recommending travel within Yukon.
Next question, Gabrielle.
Okay, and you said several times that we're not in the clear yet. I know importation of cases is a big part of that. Are there other ways that we can know when we are in the clear, and is a potential second wave of the virus part of that consideration?
Well, it really. One thing is we haven't had a first wave, but I recognize that the second wave really refers to more of a national conversation. We do anticipate that there's an ongoing risk. As long as there's COVID in the world, there is an ongoing risk, and so that risk assessment has to be continually made and assessed and reassessed. So, for example, one of the waves that we anticipate will be influenza season, and then we're going to have a lot more, just like we did last influenza season, a lot more viral respiratory illness, a lot more to sort out, higher testing, again, people coming forward for testing, the need to distinguish between what's influenza and what's COVID. Again, we will be at a certain stage in progress towards a vaccine. So by the time the fall comes around, we may have more knowledge about how close we are to a vaccine for COVID. So just many different factors. So I will say we're not in the clear, as I've said before, until we get right to the other side, and that's really having a vaccine that's available and in territory.
I would just add to that as I said before, our strength is in the isolation, and we hold on to that because those provisions are what got us to where we are today, which is we're not flattening a curve. We don't have a curve. However, as we look at other jurisdictions in Canada that do have community spread still, the plans that are developed in other areas will really determine how quickly we can get through our other phases as well. So we are cautiously optimistic with the approaches that are being taken with our neighboring jurisdictions. But again, monitoring that, being in close conversation with the premiers and the medical, the departments of health in all those jurisdictions and the public health agencies is extremely important dialogue from now until the moving between our current phase into phase 1 and then into phase 2 and subsequent phases.
Thank you. We'll move on to Claudiane, Radio-Canada.
Oui, première question pour Dr. Hanley. Quels sont les facteurs qui ont été utilisés, déterminés? Quel processus est-ce qui a été suivi pour prendre la décision d'annuler les vols internationaux?
The question is for Dr. Hanley. What factors or conditions have been taken into consideration in canceling the international flights?
So for one thing, peut-être je vais continuer en français, pardon. On n'a pas annulé les vols, c'est juste que on a les restrictions, les règlements déjà en place pour éviter que les vols internationaux arrivent ici, et donc c'est en partie le projet de loi fédéral pour la quarantaine, et aussi le directive qui est pour le moment qu'il y a 4 destinations seulement dans le pays pour les arrivées. Donc c'est anticipé que où ces mesures continuent, où on va toujours continuer avec les mesures on a en place au Yukon pour éviter les visites non essentielles. Donc on peut pas vraiment avoir 2 règles différentes au même temps, un pour les voyageurs domestiques, un pour les voyageurs internationaux. Donc je reconnais qu'il y a des niveaux des niveaux différents de fédéral et domestique pour réconcilier, mais c'est une question juste pour confirmer qu'on n'a pas les moyens pour recevoir des visites internationales à ce moment et pour les semaines devant nous. I just explained that there are federal measures already in place. We're not canceling international flights. There are federal measures in place. There are which is both the Quarantine Act and the 4 airports that are currently designated airports. So we don't know yet for sure whether these measures will be extended, and that's obviously for the federal government to decide. But whether they're extended or not, we still have our own border requirements that would also apply to visitors, non-essential visitors, whether they're coming domestically or internationally. So I realize that there are different levels to reconcile, but they will be reconciled.
Next question, Claudiane.
Oui, j'avais une question pour le Premier ministre. Donc, l'opposition continue de demander la création d'un comité spécial pour réviser la réponse à la COVID. Est-ce que, M. le Premier ministre, vous dites non à cette création de comité? Et si c'est le cas, si c'est un non, est-ce que vous avez avisé l'opposition?
So the question is for the Premier. The opposition is still asking to have a special committee to study the expenses done during the COVID crisis. And is the position of the Premier right now that no, there will not be a committee? And if this is your position, then are you going to advise the opposition soon of your decision?
Thanks, Claudiane, for the question. So again, my team remains extremely focused on the work at hand, including preparing to reopen the territory right now. And true to our commitment, we have offered to hold budget meetings to allow the opposition parties to ask additional questions about this year's budget. We're still waiting to hear if they're accepting that offer. We also will allow for time in the fall to have the complete budgetary scrutiny of our decisions to finance Yukoners and Yukon businesses through this pandemic. And that time is a better time to have that conversation because more details will come. As we've been talking about this all day, we're not through this yet. There's still going to be federal programs. There's still going to be a need for local governments to hit where federal programming doesn't hit, but the commitment is still there to Yukoners that every dollar that we spend will be scrutinized and in the regular budgetary processes.
Thank you. We'll move now to Tim from CKRW.
Hello, good afternoon. My question first here is for Premier Silver. Obviously, high-level discussions going on with the reopening of the Canada-U.S. border. Do you have any plans to mention to Prime Minister Trudeau about a potential, and I'll localize the situation where, we have a Pleasant camp and an Atlin that are free to come to Yukon now. Would you have that in place for maybe trying to push to have a Skagway to have in that kind of scenario where those folks are welcome to come into the territory without the strict rules?
It's a really great question, Tim, and it's something that I've already brought up about our close relationship to communities outside of our jurisdictional realities. I don't think we're going to see one-offs from the federal government. You saw this morning, Tim, that the Prime Minister talked about U.S. borders and basically was pretty clear that he didn't have an intention to change any of the current recommendations and requirements. But I agree with you, Tim. Wouldn't it be great to see our brothers and sisters in Skagway sooner than later? I've talked to the mayor over there, Andrew. He shares his concerns as well. Wouldn't it be great for us to be able to get down to Alaska at some point as soon as possible? But again, really, we are more concerned right now on making sure that Yukoners are safe and getting ourselves transitioning into phase 1 from our current phase, and really after that, it's going to be the international, national, local cases or or lack of cases that's going to determine how quickly we're going to be able to see our brothers and sisters in Skagway and Haines, and which we really want to do. I mean, this is the time of year where a lot of Yukoners go down to Haines, and I remember for a decade solid, I'd participate in a hockey tournament, Canada versus the States in Haines during their beer festival, and I'm really got a hankering to get down to Haines right now, but not for now.
Follow-up question, Tim?
Okay. When do you plan on speaking with Governor Dunleavy? Or have those discussions taken place? Just follow up on that. And when do you expect all the troop movement through the territory?
Yeah, so we spoke with Governor Dunleavy, I believe last week or 2 weeks ago now, and we had a great conversation at that time about our plans and for transitioning Alaskans through expediting that process. We had a conversation at that time about the barracks in Fairbanks, and we had some concerns from some communities that some of the soldiers may or may not know the recommendations and requirements that are here in Canada. And we had his commitment to look into that. And since that time, we've had some questions and issues about the replacement of soldiers, and so we do have a few new things that we would like to talk with the governor about again. So we're making sure that we have that regular contract. So we expect to have a meeting with Governor Dunleavy very soon, within the upcoming days.
Thank you, Premier Silver. Thank you, Dr. Hanley. Thank you for your time today. The next COVID-19 update will be Friday, May 15th at 2 p.m.